The White House in a place called Farragut Square in downtown D.C. We're seeing video on social media of police rushing to the scene. I checked in with the Secret Service because they protect the White House and was told that two uniformed National Guard members were involved in a shooting. At least one of them was struck. Their condition is not known. The nature of the incident was not known by this person. It's being handled by the D.C. police, not the Secret Service, because they've decided there's no nexus to the White House, no threat to the White House. So the circumstances of this incident are unclear. Remember, of course, that uniformed National Guard are regularly patrolling the streets of Washington, having been deployed there by President Trump. That's subject to a legal fight. Actually, 5 days ago, a judge ordered the Trump administration to halt that deployment. That's still being litigated. But again, so all we know is that two uniformed National Guard members involved in a shooting, one was struck. The condition of that person is unknown at this time.
Yeah, so the AP is reporting that two National Guard members were struck, the two that were involved. Again, that differs a little bit from our reporting. We'll see if that gets updated. Ken, you were saying that your sources have said there's no nexus. The FBI is saying no nexus. What does that mean?
The Secret Service, meaning there's no investigative, there's no angle for them to investigate this. They've already concluded there was no threat to the White House or the president. It's a shooting that occurred in D.C., and so it's being investigated and responded to by the D.C. police, not by the Secret Service. It remains to be seen. I've also checked in with the FBI. It's unclear at this point whether they will get involved, but right now the D.C. police is responding, Katie.
All right, so the president is not in Washington right now. He's not at the White House, even though the White House is on lockdown. He, is in Florida for the holiday break. J.D. Vance is, in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. In terms of how hard it is to investigate situations like this, Ken, who ends up taking the lead when you have a shooting? And Capitol Police might normally deal with this sort of thing, but you have a shooting so close to a place like the White House.
Well, the agencies work together so much anyhow. So if there was, as Ken said, if there's any nexus to someone had been trying to get in the White House, or if it was a federal building, they'll decide that. All the other crimes, DC's are originally going to, start investigating it. And then if it turns out a nexus to some type of federal thing where the FBI may have lead, or Secret Service, but they do that all the time because those properties are on top of each other. They literally sit there, and there's so many federal agencies. But when the crimes happen, and the fact that it's National Guard, they're going to have to start looking into what are the rules of engagement. Did the National Guard members see a violent crime happen, and then they tried to interdict with it, and then that's what led to the shooting or something? So the D.C. police will do that. The National Guard will be involved, obviously, because it's their personnel. And then the other federal agencies
now they're shooting at the National Guard
to see if there's something that brings it into their chain of investigations, if it was on a property, or if somehow it turns out that it was someone doing something against something protected by the Secret Service. So they do that all the time because they just lay on top of each other as it is.
All right, the White House has just issued a statement. Caroline Leavitt says the president is aware, he's been briefed. They're actively monitoring this tragic situation. Again, we don't know the status of the National Guard members. The AP is reporting that two National Guard members were shot. Let's also bring in MSNL law enforcement analyst and former U.S. Capitol Police Chief Tom Manger.
What they're not saying, National Guard is dressed up as National Guard. We all know what the American National Guard looks like. Secret Service is dressed up like ordinary citizens. That way they blend in with the rest of the civilian life. You're actually shooting at military people? Hello?
You may know the National Guard has been spending a lot of time at different metro stations, and Farragut, the Farragut area actually has a couple of metro stations there. So it would be very likely that you had National Guard folks at those subway stations. And so if something were to happen there, they would be right there on the scene. I know that I frequently frequently take the metro in and around DC, and at almost every station downtown, when you come up out of the station, there are 2 or 3 or 4 National Guardsmen standing around that area. And when you get, the closer you get to the White House, the more agencies that you have, that whether it's the Federal Protection Service, the Uniformed Secret Service, Metropolitan Police Department, you have the Metro Transit Police also have jurisdiction at all the metro stations. So you could have a half a dozen agencies in any given area, especially in the downtown area.
For those of us who don't live in DC and maybe are not familiar with the metro system there, why are National Guard members at all these stops?
That was just one of the places, I think, that when the president deployed the additional resources to Washington, D.C., I know that the National Guard checked in with Chief Smith from the Metropolitan Police Department, said, where do you need us? Where can we be of assistance? And just having a higher profile of folks in and around the metro stations was something that they thought would add value. The metro system in Washington, D.C. is like any other metro system in the subway system in any big city in this country. You have a lot of stops that there are some crime issues. You have a lot of stops that there are no crime issues. And downtown D.C. is generally pretty safe, especially on weekdays during the rush hour when there's a lot of people there. Not too many issues, but the downtown area is always a place where there's a lot of people. So if you have somebody who, or when something does happen, you've got a fair number of members of the public that could be in and around a shooting like that. It makes it all the more dangerous.
Yeah, and I just want to stress, the AP is reporting that the 2 National Guard members were shot. Our reporting, according to Ken Delaney, is one of them were shot. In these early stages of any investigation, we're still relying on preliminary information. So I would just hold our breath before we are concrete on anything out there. That's a good note to keep in mind. Ken Delaney, can I talk broadly about the atmosphere and the environment in Washington, D.C. over the past few months since the National Guard was deployed? What's it been like there?
Well, people have sort of gotten used to seeing uniformed National Guard members on the streets. Initially it was very controversial, but then remember the mayor sort of decided to not to fight it and to go along with it, although the Attorney General of Washington sued to stop this deployment and got a favorable ruling 5 days ago from a federal judge ordering the Trump administration actually to withdraw the troops, but that hasn't happened. And it's sort of, people have just gone on with life. I mean, there's not much the National Guard can do. They can't arrest people. And so it's sort of become part of the firmament. But of course, there's so much controversy happening in the United States right now with ICE, who are also wearing uniforms and wearing masks. And so you don't know, people walking around with uniforms.
I beg your pardon. National Guard can't arrest a civilian, just like anybody else. They can arrest a civilian, providing that the governor of that state gives them authorization of doing so. The same as they would be, let's say, if it was a state of an emergency of a hurricane or a flood or a tornado. Yes, National Guard can arrest civilian life under certain circumstances and guidelines.
Her prayers to the 2 guardsmen who were shot. Again, AP says 2. Christine Ohm now says 2. And we're waiting to see the status on those guardsmen, how they're doing after this situation. Again, the president's not there. The vice president is not there. The president's in Florida. The vice president is in Kentucky. The White House, though, at least a moment ago, was under lockdown. Unclear if that has changed. There are so many different federal law enforcement agencies in Washington, D.C. It's a complicated place to enforce the law in. And then the addition of the National Guard patrolling, as Ken and everybody were talking about, complicates it further. Rob D'Amico, I know that the Secret Service had no nexus on this, as Ken was saying, so that means that they're going to be taking a back seat right now. But I would imagine that the FBI are going to be interviewing, or going to want to interview this suspect. And
now you see the way those men was dressed? That's Army personnel. You're shooting amongst Army personnel? You're either a nut, or you're one of them, or you got more artillery than they got. And what's the odds of that happening?
What happened probably just by getting the CCT. And FBI works with Metro Data all the time. So if they start interviewing them, somehow it pushes over to the federal side. The National Guardsmen, if they've been federalized though, are federal agents. So assault on a federal agent that could have nexus to the FBI. So they'll start talking about that, but they'll probably keep the Metro Police in the lead at this point, just depending on the circumstances of it. And it'll be interesting to see if I don't even know if some of the National Guard are armed and some aren't, or if they're all armed or all not. They'll definitely start looking into how the violence, were they shot back? Did they just try to stop something? And all that'll go into it. But the FBI will be in close concert with Metro Dade PD.
Yeah.
Metro Dade. I'm talking Florida. It's DC. Yeah, with the DC police.
Tom, has there been tension with the National Guard? I mean, NPR spoke with a number of National Guard members from Ohio on the condition of anonymity. And they talked to them just the other day, on November 10th. And they talked about the deployment to various cities, including D.C. One said, "This is not what I signed up for." 3 of them declined voluntary deployments, and they were deeply uncomfortable with what they were doing. Has it been tense with the National Guard around?
So it has not been tense as far as the public and the National Guard, but I think it really is no secret that many of the National Guard folks don't understand what the purpose of their being there is. I know that I have quick interactions with them when I see them occasionally, and they'll roll their eyes. They'll one of them said that he thought it was a waste of time, and so I think they understood at first when they were deployed there with all the other federal resources. But then so many of the federal resources have been pulled back out of D.C., and yet the National Guard has stayed there. And they're staying at first it was the touristy spots. You saw them down near the museums and the monuments along the mall. And then it seemed like that they were deployed to many of the downtown subway metro stations. And so I know that I don't feel like there's tension with the public and the National Guard or with their presence, but I do think that that many of them wonder why they're there, what their purpose is, and how long they're going to be there.
Their presence is also under question, whether it's legal. Last week, a federal judge ruled the Trump administration's deployment of the National Guard in D.C. was unlawful, arguing it lacks authority and is violating the District of Columbia's sovereign powers under the Home Rule Act. The Trump administration is appealing that order. They filed their appeal, Ken, last night.
Yeah, that's right. And that will be ongoing. That's part of the litigation that's been happening around the country. Various challenges have been made. But the Trump administration is standing by this policy of deploying National Guard troops to cities, saying that it's necessary to combat crime. As Tom just articulated, there's a lot of dispute about that, even among the National Guard members themselves. But in D.C., it's been less controversial than in other places. Again, the mayor sort of made a strategic decision to go along with it, essentially, initially, although the Attorney General is challenging that deployment in court. Again, it hasn't been really much of a subject of contention on the streets because oftentimes you'll see them essentially uniformed National Guard members gathered in groups, scrolling on their phones, chatting. They're not really involved in very much that's controversial here in D.C., Katie.
There is a little bit of there's a little more news out of this. DC Fire EMS say they've treated 3 gunshot victims. They're not confirming if any of them were National Guardsmen, but they also say 3 were transported to area hospitals. Do we have any indication yet, Ken, if that third person, this might not be known, potentially was the suspect?
No indication. Yeah. Although the Secret Service spokesperson, when I talked to him, said that the suspect initially had fled. But unclear whether the suspect was shot or was that a bystander. There, you can see photos on social media of a lot of shattered glass on the scene where the shooting appears to have happened at 17th and I Streets in downtown D.C. near Farragut Square. But no, that's new information. 3 taken to the hospital. And again, as you said, Kristi Noem, the DHS secretary, has said that 2 were shot. Initially, the Secret Service spokesperson said that 1 National Guard member has been shot. As you said, in a situation like this, early reports are often inaccurate, so we'll have to just wait and see how that all shakes out, Katie.
Yeah, and especially in a situation where we are so close to the White House. If you're looking at the right-hand side of your screen where the helicopter shot is zooming out, you can see the White House. You see where the police presence is in the middle of that intersection, and just down the street, it's 2 blocks. Is the White House where that big flag is waving in the wind. So Farragut
been there a
2
dozen
blocks away.
times.
1
Know
block
exactly
beneath
where
Farragut
it is.
Square, you're going to see Lafayette Square, which is just in front of the White House. Normally, obviously, a very locked down area. Maybe perhaps a bit less so because the President of the United States is not in town right now. He's home at Mar-a-Lago for the Thanksgiving break. That being said, the White House itself was locked down for a time. Kayla Gardner has been inside the gates of the White House, and she's inside the briefing room right now. Kayla, what can you tell us from there?
Well, Katie, I can just tell you what's happened over the last hour or so here. I was sitting in our cafeteria area on our laptop when I saw a group of press and photographers rush in through the side door of our press room area. They were told by Secret Service to get inside immediately. We are actually all still inside the briefing room. The doors are actually locked, so we physically cannot leave. But there's typically a large number of press here from day to day, but with the president in Florida today, it's a really small group. But Secret Service immediately rushed us inside. We now understand from the DHS Secretary Noem that 2 National Guard members were shot just a few blocks from here. And just to underscore just how close this is, I've walked those very streets dozens of times. There's many federal employees who walk near there, people who work in the White House, in the executive office building nearby. There's tons of restaurants and places. It's very busy during the day here, but just really startling. And the White House today says that the president has been briefed on this situation, and they are calling it a tragic shooting today.
Yeah, as we've heard from Caroline Levitt, again, the president is aware. We don't yet know the circumstances surrounding this, so this is all conjecture. But Tom, you were talking about potentially this happening near a subway station, a metro station in D.C. You said this is the site of a couple different stations, and that the National Guard had been patrolling those stations. How has the crime situation been in D.C. since the National Guard was deployed?
I think that you certainly saw a drop in crime when the federal resources in late summer, back when the federal resources were deployed there. And I think that the president and his administration took a great deal